Business reliability is defined as the consistent ability of a company to deliver products, services, or performance which meet customer expectations without failure or overtime. It signifies trust, dependability, and sustainability in operations, covering availability, uptime, speed, and accuracy. Reliable businesses consistently fulfill promises without fail, ensuring high customer satisfaction and long-term sustainability. And my friends, we talk about the world of electronics manufacturing. One man that's adopted this very principle of reliability and performance is my friend, Mike Konrad. He's the founder and CEO of Aqueous Technologies. It's a company that he founded in 1992, which has become an industry leader in post-reflow cleaning and sustainability and reliability solutions for the electronics manufacturing industry. He is also the host of two successful podcasts entitled The Reluctant Entrepreneur and Electronics Reliability. He's interested in discovering the journeys of entrepreneurs and electronic reliability between the two efforts. He's got more than 30 years of experience in entrepreneurship, and he brings a unique perspective and introspection when it comes to the topics of business growth, innovation, and sustainability. If you want your business to have a knack for reliability, then Konrad is the authority on the source of reliability in business. And he joined me this week to have a wide-ranging discussion on everything from electronics manufacturing, business growth, and innovation, and the role inclusion has to play in order for business to move forward into the future. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's end the week by having an innovative business conversation. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn about your experience in technology, business, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. It's great to see you, and happy Friday to you, my friend.
Happy Friday, Kevin.
Absolutely. So, by kind of that, you have spent some time, almost 3 decades, in the field of technology and electronics, my friend. And I wanted to start by asking you about how you think the electronics industry has allowed the world to become more inclusive and inviting, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
On the electronics manufacturing world, yes, I'll give you two answers, Kevin. We are exceptionally inclusive for the primary reason, besides all the good benefits of being inclusive. There is a severe, like in probably many industries, there's a labor shortage. There's not enough people, not enough young people in high school level and college level focusing on STEM. Therefore, we're not producing as many engineers as we used to. And the electronics industry thrives on engineers and technicians and people who know about electronics, therefore electronic assembly. So anyone with that kind of knowledge is in there's a great amount of desire for more people with that type of background, that type of education, that type of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I know that you're the founder and CEO of a company called Aqueous Technologies, my friend, which is a company that you launched in 1992, my friend, and it has won awards, and it's all about electronics manufacturing and cleaning, my friend. So tell me about the post reflow cleaning aspect of the business and all about it, my friend. What do you want people to know about your day job and why you love it so much, my friend?
Well, we're part of the manufacturing process that most people outside of electronic manufacturing have no clue that that process even exists. So when electronic components are soldered to circuit boards, there's a process, the what we call the reflow process or the soldering process, is a dirty process. We use chemicals called flux, which is absolutely required to be mixed with the solder in order to get good intermetallic bonds. So that way the component and the board, basically where they connect, become one solid piece of metal. And flux should not remain on the board afterwards because it contains all sorts of nasty things that are required for the soldering process, but are detrimental to the board after the soldering process. So our machines are like giant expensive dishwashers that after boards are soldered, they're put into these types of machines, and all of the contamination from the soldering process and from the board fabrication process and from the component fabrication process and dirty Cheeto fingers that touch the board during the assembly process, all those contaminants are removed so that the board becomes more reliable in the field wherever it's deployed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, based on your over 30 years of experience, I'm curious to ask you about how the word reliability has sort of gone through an evolution or a changing of the guard, if you will. What do you mean? What do you think it means to be reliable in business, and how do you think the term business reliability has really gone through a transformation? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I'll give you two answers. In a very specific answer, circuit boards are reliable when they operate without failure for the intended life of the board in the intended operating environment. So reliability is important at with any type of board. On what our industry calls class 3 assemblies, we have three types of assemblies: class 1, 2, and 3. Class 3 are expected to never fail or not fail for the expected life of the product. That could be military, that could be a guidance system in a cruise missile to make sure that if the military ever fires off a cruise missile, it lands at the intended target and doesn't go off course because the board failed and was not reliable. That could be a pacemaker or a defibrillator installed in your chest by the surgeons. We don't expect that to fail for the life of the product. So class 3 stuff, reliability is exceptionally important. When we get down to class 1 and 2 products, this could be my iPhone. This could be a Nintendo or PlayStation, whatever type of thing like that. No one dies if those things fail. But several years ago, the Sony PlayStation had an issue and had to be recalled. And it was due to, in this case, contamination that caused all these machines to fail. Actually, it wasn't the Sony PlayStation. It was the Microsoft Xbox. Sorry, Sony. It was the Microsoft Xbox that failed. It cost Microsoft $1 billion with a B to recall all those Xboxes and fix them and replace them. Now, no one died because the Xbox had that red ring of death, that error message that was fatal. No one died, but no person died. What did suffer great harm was Microsoft's bottom line. It cost them $1 billion, and it really damaged their reputation. I don't know how to put a price on that. So reliability is important, even if the product is a consumer product, particularly if the product is military or aerospace or medical or high reliability communications. Reliability is very important. Think about it, Kevin. What part of your life does not rely on a circuit board? Everything around you is
Yeah.
electronic, right?
Yeah.
So
We're having this conversation electronically through a computer, right? So absolutely.
you and I are having a good conversation, partially because the technology we're using, the cameras, the microphones, the switchers, the preamps, the lighting, is all controlled by various circuit boards. And if those become unreliable, the world stops moving, and that is incredibly harmful to economies, to safety, to health, to transportation, to communication. All that stops working. So reliability in electronics is vital. It's non-negotiable. They have to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I know that you're the host of two successful podcasts. One being reliability matters, which focuses on electronic reliability, and the other is called the Reluctant Entrepreneur, where you explore the real journey of business leaders. So tell me about the podcast and their missions, my friend.
Right. I have two podcasts. What I like to call my big podcast and my little podcast. My bigger podcast is called Reliability Matters. It's designed to be viewed or listened to by people in the electronics manufacturing space because I interview subject matter experts in various disciplines within electronic assembly on the subject of reliability, manufacturing best practices, things like that. And I started that show because in our industry specifically, but this probably applies to many industries, we have what I like to refer to as the silver tsunami. So people with gray hair are retiring at a record pace. The baby boomers are all pretty much at the end of their career life, and they're about to move to Florida, California, or Arizona and enjoy warm weather for the rest of their lives. And for quite some time, young people were not coming in to take their place. So we had a brain drain, if you will. And one of the reasons I started that show is to memorialize, to capture the great knowledge of these well-seasoned subject matter experts and make them fully searchable and make the subjects fully searchable and viewable to perhaps younger emerging engineers coming into our space. It's a knowledge vault. So that was the motivation to do that show. The other show I do, which is a little bit more of a passion project, is called the Reluctant Entrepreneur podcast, where I interview entrepreneurs, business owners of various types on their personal journey into entrepreneurship, the highs, the lows, the struggles, the successes, the mistakes they've made, what they've learned from those mistakes, and things like that, to allow people who are contemplating entrepreneurship in their future to get a realistic view of what entrepreneurship is about. Because society romanticizes entrepreneurship. I can't tell you how many times I've had my business for 34 years, and I can't tell you how many times, Kevin, friends and family have come up to me and say, "You're so lucky. You own your own business. You're your own boss. You can write yourself checks. You can take as much vacation as you want." And I just laugh because, particularly in the early days, when they say I had no boss, everybody was my boss. I was the bottom of the food chain, Kevin. I reported to customers, to vendors, to employees, to the government, to technology changes, to economies, to regulation, to the weather. I had to report to all that. And so that's a bit of a fallacy. And when people say, oh, you can just write yourself checks, sure, I can. I can write myself $1 billion check tomorrow. It won't clear the bank, Kevin, but I can do that, right? I
Yeah.
can do that. And in terms of take all the time you want off, sure, I could. But in the early days, if I left, the company would fail. Because in the earliest days, I started it out of my garage. I was a solopreneur for the first 6 months or so until I started hiring a team. And there was no option to take time off. I was working 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you do what you have to do, particularly in the early days. So there's this romantic view of entrepreneurship. And if someone's contemplating leaving their job, leaving their career, thinking they're going to get into this nirvana world of entrepreneurship where they have no boss and they can take as much time off as they want and make all the money in the world, it's better to learn that's not true now than before they leave their career and waste all their money and blow all their life savings on a project that's not based on reality. So that's one of the reasons I started The Reluctant Entrepreneur. The other reason, Kevin, is a lot of entrepreneurs are in that struggle. They're frustrated. It's not going as planned. They're running out of money. They're tired. They're completely worn out. They're empty and they're ready to give up. And one of the goals of the show is to allow someone in that situation to hear from other entrepreneurs who have made it, who are now successful, and learn that they had the same experience. Keep going. Don't give up. You're so close to succeeding. Most companies are so close to succeeding when they throw in the towel. And just to provide them some encouragement to keep going. All the struggles they're going through are normal. They're part of the curriculum that you unwittingly signed up for to be an entrepreneur. It's like a PhD course that you never graduate from. It's just constant learning. And so those are the two primary goals of that show.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I'm personally interested in your answer to this question. So I am going to ask you this because based on your experience in entrepreneurship and the world of business, the field of education is also changing, my friend. A 4 year degree is great, but, sometimes going to school for all of those years and getting a 4 year degree isn't for everybody. And I wanted your opinion on the rise of vocational and trade education because I really think it's carving out a space in the marketplace to get more people employed. And I was curious to get your thoughts on the importance of vocational education as well and how important it is to grow the business and sort of life community. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I'm right with you, Kevin. I built a successful business ultimately in the electronics manufacturing space. I've been in this industry for 40 years now, and much of the industry knows who I am because I create a lot of content. I dropped out of college, Kevin, after 6 weeks. In fact, I wasn't even accomplished enough to drop out of university. I dropped out of a community college after 6 weeks. And I made it in a very high tech industry. I give lectures to PhDs and things like that. So I recommend college for particularly if you don't really know what you want to do in life. Does no harm. Now, I'm not factoring in all the college debt and things like that. But I think you hit something that's important. We being the United States of America and Canada and any country for that matter, we desperately need more people entering the trades. We need electricians, we need carpenters, we need plumbers, we need drywall people. We need construction people. We need more people in trades. I read a study a few years ago of the average person who graduates university with a 4-year degree that took loans, and they're, say, $120,000 in debt the day they graduate. They get their first big boy or big girl job out of college. And of course, it's entry level. It's entry level for college graduates. They're making not a lot of money. They're probably making $50,000, $60,000 a year, brand new out of college, first job at a company. And then there's a kid, and they spend $120,000 or maybe more on that education. Then you look at a young person that graduates high school, or maybe they don't graduate high school, but they go to trade school and they learn to be a plumber. This was the example that was in this paper I read. And they start off as an apprentice plumber at $50,000, $60,000 a year. And within 3 or 4 years, they're a journeyman plumber making $80,000 or $90,000 a year. And then if they start their own business, they are making $250,000, $300,000, $500,000 a year, maybe more. And they have $25,000 in student debt, assuming they borrowed everything. So the amount of time it takes to recoup, if we compare traditional university education, a bachelor's of engineering or bachelor's of science, versus a trade school certificate, the point at which you really start making more money than that the university student starts making more money than the trade school student could be 10 to 12 years into their career before one salary outpaces the other. If it does, there are plenty of trade school people that go on to start their own businesses that make more money than a person working at Lockheed Martin or NASA or whatever would make. So I think we really need to encourage young people to consider one of their post-high school options to be trade school. College is great, but trade school makes a lot of sense for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I'm also curious to get your perspective on the intersection of business growth, reliability, and the idea of innovation, and how all three of those principles are interconnected in today's modern society. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, innovation is important, obviously. We are living in a world today of evolution, which is obviously one aspect of innovation. There are two types of change that we see in the world. One is revolution. That's something that's invented that has never been invented before. And revolution is rare. It's very rare. When electricity was discovered, that was revolutionary. When flight was discovered, the Wright brothers, that was revolutionary. Everything from the Wright brothers' first airplane to a modern 787 Dreamliner or an Airbus A350-1000, a wide-body plane. Everything from the Wright brothers' plane to that is evolution. Today, we have basically everything we have today that's electronic is just a smaller, faster, cheaper version of what we had in the 60s and 70s, almost literally. And so innovation drives both revolution, which is rarer, and evolution, which is prevalent today. So we need to constantly innovate. In my company and other companies in my space, we have to stay ahead. We have to be like the surfer on the surfboard at the slight forward tip of the wave, because otherwise the wave will swallow us or we'll fall off the backside of it. There's probably surfing terms for that, but I'm not a surfer. So technology is always changing. It changes. It's changed since you and I started talking 20 minutes ago. And so if we don't innovate, we're actually moving backwards. If we have a slow pace of innovation, we're just keeping up. We're just barely keeping up with the state of the industry, whatever industry we're in. So innovation to me is moving forward at the minimum speed to match what society needs, what tech changes have come about. AI, people say AI is revolutionary. And I agree partially. The application of AI is revolutionary, but the technology is not revolutionary. It's evolutionary. They are supercomputers. They're just faster, way faster computers than we had 10 years ago, than we had probably 2 years ago. It's evolving, and that's all a result of innovation. If we don't innovate, we move backwards. So I think it's vitally important that companies put a significant amount of their available resources into innovation, into research and development, into building the needs for tomorrow, not just trying to satisfy the needs of today, because the wave will crush them at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I wanted your opinion on this, building on our last discussion, because a foreign survey from last year indicated that a record number of senior executives rank innovation as one of the top three priorities to move their business forward in terms of business growth. And then again, our friends over at PricewaterhouseCoopers also reported last year that 93% of executives agree that building and maintaining trust, which is based or built on reliability, improves the bottom line, my friend. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on those findings and the importance of building trust and how it's related to innovation as well. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I'm going to concentrate on the trust segment, and I'll substitute another word for trust. I personally have a love-hate relationship with the word trust in terms of business, because I think probably not the way you meant it, but in business, this is going to sound provocative, but I'll explain what I mean. In business, there's no place for trust. There's a place for agreements. Not everyone earns trust. Some people give trust out too quickly. Some people get unearned trust. Some people get earned trust. But it's a squirrely term. So I like the term agreements. But we do want our ultimate customers to trust us. So I use the word authority. We need to build authority in our space. And how do you do that? I'll tell you how you don't do it. You don't run ads to say, my product is the best. All the other products out there suck. Buy from me, buy from me, buy from me. The traditional sales methods that we all used back in the day are obsolete. Young people particularly, but even older people, seek out answers to their own questions rather than waiting for an ad to pop in front of them in a magazine or on a banner ad on a website or something. And what we started doing was, instead of trying to sell our product, which we did for years, we switched over to an education model. We educate. Our products solve a problem. Our products make our customers' products more reliable. But we can't talk about our product because most of our customers at first don't understand why their products are failing. We understand it. They don't understand it. So for us to talk about a product doesn't land, right? They're like, okay, I don't want to talk about your washing machine. I have products that are failing. I don't know why. So we have managed over several years now, through creating valuable content, non-commercial, completely 100% non-commercial educational content, through webinars, through podcasts, through lectures. I travel around the world regularly giving lectures at technical conferences on the subject of reliability and failure analysis and avoidance and all that. And what that does, Kevin, is it builds authority. And when you build authority, you become a word I don't like because it's been hijacked by others, but you become an influencer, not a TikTok Kim Kardashian twerky kind of influencer, but a authority-based influencer. And when we simply have one goal, which is to educate, educated people make educated choices. And we consider ourselves an educated choice, but it's the customer who says, I need to get your thing. I need to buy your product. I understand it now. I understand why our boards are failing. I understand it's in our world, it's contamination. I understand you guys can eliminate that contamination. I understand my boards will stop failing. And they fall on their sword to push management to buy our equipment or someone else's equipment like ours that does the same thing. So to me, trust, that's part of trust. I wouldn't argue if we call that trust, but it really is building authority and just educate. And in our experience, sales will come, but it starts with education. It starts with building that trust between the person consuming our content and us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I'm curious to build on that by asking you, how do like entrepreneurs and organizational leaders go from uncertainty to business confidence, my friend? Because I know that throughout your business journey, there have been uncertain times, and it's taken you time to build up your definition of what it means to be confident in business. So, how do you go from uncertainty to having unstoppable business confidence, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I can't take full credit for it, Kevin. I call it my burning building moment. I've had several burning building moments, and I'll explain what that is. It's a horrible vision, but just go with me here. If you're if you're in a high-rise building, you're in a skyscraper on the 70th floor, and there's a fire, and no one's coming out to put it out. So you find yourself standing on the ledge, the window ledge of the building. No one in a rational mind, in a rational state, would contemplate jumping out of a 70-story building. However, if the building's on fire and the fire is slowly raging towards you, if you stay in the building, there's a 100% chance you will not survive. If you jump off the ledge of a 70-story building, there is a 0.00001% chance that maybe a flatbed truck filled with pillows will be driving by at just the right moment and you'll survive, right? Not likely, but there's a slightly better chance. So you see these tragic views. 9/11 showed us that. These tragic views of very competent, rational people jumping out of a building. And I have made many decisions that were counterintuitive when I was standing metaphorically on the ledge of a burning building. So there was one point in my business where we were almost done. I was ready to throw in the towel. We had no money. Everything was broken. Nothing was working right. I made every mistake that any founder could possibly make and more. I think I wrote the book on the mistakes. And I have a mentor who told me, she says, "Do you want to sell more of your products?" I said, "Yes." She says, "Then shut up talking about your products. Stop talking about your products. Nobody cares." And I'm like, that makes no sense to me. That's wacky. That's just crazy. But the building was on fire. So I'm like, okay, I probably got 4 days left of cash. All right, let's try it. So I made the leap and it worked instantly. It worked. And other counterintuitive things that it turned out in hindsight were all based on fear-based decisions. I stopped doing those things, or I started doing other things that, absent of the building on fire, metaphorically speaking, I would never have considered because they were counterintuitive. They were scary. And when I had no choice but to say, okay, what the heck? Let's just, what I'm doing is not working. Let's try this crazy idea. Why not? all those crazy ideas worked. So um, my my takeaway from that and my advice to those maybe in a similar situation is stop waiting for the building to catch fire. You don't have to wait. Start doing those types of things. Whatever, however that applies to your business. It's different in every type of business. It's probably different with every person. But um, try and take fear off the table. So many bad decisions I've made were all fear-based. I was afraid of losing an order to company A because my competitor would find out. So I'd give them a lowball deal where I lost money on the deal just so I didn't look bad. I was afraid of not exhibiting at a trade show that didn't get us any new sales for the last 3 years that cost us $100,000 every time we exhibited every year. I was afraid to not go because I didn't want to be judged by my competitors or my customers. So when the building was on fire and I ran out of money, there was no choice. Cancel all the shows. There was no choice. So, what I've learned in retrospect is to trust the process. I don't have to wait until I smell smoke before I make a provocative change in my business model. Now I trust the process. Every time I've made a provocative change, at least provocative to me in the moment, it's been wildly successful. So now I trust the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, building on that point, our friends at Goldman Sachs, last year they did a survey and a study that revealed that approximately 41% of small business owners report a lack of confidence in their financial future, my friend, of their business, which is the highest level, according to Goldman Sachs, in 17 years of polling, my friend. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on those findings and how it affects business development as a whole. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I didn't quite catch the finding. What was the takeaway for the finding?
Yeah, Goldman Sachs reported that 41% of small business owners lack confidence in the financial future of their business, which is the lowest point in polling in 17 years, my friend. So, what do you think that tells you about the future viability of business confidence in America? If business people don't believe that they have enough money to remain solvent, my friend, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I would question the basis for that. How much of that is just fear-based? How much of that are they manifesting themselves? Um, and I let me give you an anecdote that's going to sound like it has nothing to do with your question, but it will. When I turned 30, I got my pilot's license. I learned to fly planes, and during my training, my instructor drilled into me, and it turns out every pilot, whether they're flying a little Cessna or a 777, every pilot's been trained the exact same way. The 100% of the time you're in that cockpit, in control of the plane, you have to do three things at the same time. You need to aviate, you need to navigate, and you need to communicate. All three. And I like one of my ghoulish guilty pleasures is reading NTSB, National Safety Transportation Board, crash incident reports on civilian aircraft that have crashed. And in almost, not exclusively, but in almost every case, it had to do with some relatively minor thing going on with the plane. And the flight crew, the first officer and the captain, got so distracted trying to troubleshoot the problem, they didn't see the mountain in front of them, or something to that effect. They stopped aviating, or they stopped communicating, or they stopped navigating. One of the two, one of the three. And I think in business, the same principle applies. It's not necessarily aviate, navigate, communicate, but there's an equivalent for that in your business, in any business. And when I focused solely on bringing in more cash. In the early days of the company, we had payroll every Thursday. I hated Thursdays because we had to have the money in our bank on Wednesday night. And I would spend Friday to the following Wednesday bringing in cash. I was not aviating, navigating, communicating. I was only doing one of those things. And in that moment, my mindset had a very low confidence in my ability to stay in business because I'm solely looking at one issue, cash, cash in the bank. I would make a whole bunch of short-term decisions because of my lack of confidence, because of my fear, and my overwhelming desire to bring in more cash to cover 1 week's payroll, that the things I didn't pay attention to all got worse. So I would end up getting the cash, but then next month I'd have a profit problem because we were losing money because I brought in cash that wasn't profitable. And if I looked at just another KPI and concentrated solely on that one, I would lose confidence and make fear-based decisions, and other KPIs would suffer because of that. So I think that these surveys that, where people say, yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence in my company or its ability to stay solvent, those are usually, my guess is, I don't know for sure, but my guess is someone's taking a very powerful magnifying glass and looking at one of the elements. They're looking at either the navigate, the communicate, or the aviate. And what we really need to do is back up, take a deep breath, and look at the bigger picture, the wider picture, more perspective. We need to go up to 30,000 feet, not 2 feet above the data, and get more perspective. And then start making better decisions. The pursuit of cash brings in cash at the expense of something else. The pursuit of market share improves market share at the expense of something else. Everything has an expense of something else when we're focusing on one thing. I believe if you want to raise the level of confidence, if you want to improve your company, make great decisions. Just make great decisions, not fear-based, great decisions. And when we just make great decisions, guess what comes in? Cash, profit, market share, reputation. All those things start to rise. If they don't, you're not making great decisions. Recalibrate, readjust, make better decisions. Quit chasing numbers. Quit chasing single goals, because then you're going to end up being asked to take a survey and you're going to say, I don't have any confidence in my business, because you're looking at it way too closely. And just need to broaden, just start making great decisions, take fear off the table. And I know that sounds so simple and it sounds Pollyannish, and someone in the middle of this hedge maze right now is going to go, yeah, Mike, easy for you to say. That sounds a little kumbaya. Let's just smoke the peace pipe and pass it on. No, I've lived it. It works 100%. It works. You just have to be desperate enough or brave enough to consider the possibility that this could work. And when people argue with me, Mike, that can't work, I turn around and go, well, how's your plan doing? Yeah. And usually that's greeted with a long pause, and they're like, okay, fair point. So I hope that answers your question, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked earlier about the labor shortage. And as you know, Mike, I was born with cerebral palsy, and I've dedicated my adult life to advocate for the hiring of more people with disabilities, because I believe that that's an untapped segment of our labor population. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on the competitive advantage that people with disabilities can add to an organizational culture, and how we can shift attitudinal barriers of employers to give employees with disabilities more opportunity to enter the workforce. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I think one of the downsides of human nature, and this has been going on for millennia, it's not new, is people tend to hire people or be friends with people or live near people who look like them. That could be race, that could be ethnicity, that could be religion, that could be physical status, and uh, it's a shame because we're really narrowing the scope of friendship, the scope of talent, and it's ignorance, really. I'm not even. I mean, some of it I'm sure is evil. Some of it is bad. All of it is ignorance, and not all of it I think is you know created from malice. I think it's a lot of it is just ignorance, and um, I do believe that within the disabled community there are a host of things. There's probably a few dozen things you can't physically do.
Hmm.
You're not going to be riding a unicycle in a three-ring circus. I don't think you'll get that job. Well, I wouldn't get that job either because I would fall off it. But you get my point.
Hmm.
But there are probably as many things as you physically can't do. There's probably triple the amount of things you physically can do. And I think that human nature views a physical difference and they read more into it than there is. Some might assume there's an intellectual deficit with someone with cerebral palsy or MS or Lou Gehrig's or something like that, and it's not even related. But I think that through ignorance and sometimes through malice, people come to those conclusions. And I also think people are afraid to they feel awkward for some reason. And fortunately, that I haven't experienced that, but I have many friends who would feel awkward talking to someone who is physically disabled because they don't want to maybe it comes from a good place, misplaced. Maybe they just don't want to make the person feel bad. Maybe they don't want to get caught staring. Who knows? But I think human nature really desperately needs a lot of improvement in that category. And I think businesses who ignore that segment of the population, that very large segment of the population, are really shortchanging themselves more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I'm going to combine my next two questions because they're interconnected. And my friend, I wanted your opinion on the skills required to start a business versus the skills needed to scale a business, my friend. And what do you think it means? What is the difference in your mind from growing or growth or scaling a business, my friend? So, what do you believe is needed to start and scale a business? And what's the difference between growth and scale in your mind, my friend?
My God, you do your homework, Kevin. I'm impressed by that. Okay, let's start with skills. And I'll put skills in air quotes here, quote, skills, unquote.
Yeah.
When I started my business, I was 33 years old, 32 years old. I'm 65 now. And uh, I had created a technology that it's the basis for our company today. And no one else was. I worked for an equipment manufacturer at the time, and I came up with this idea. I designed the proof of concept. I designed a prototype. I pitched it to my employer for them to build, and they weren't interested. So I thought, okay, I had so much passion for this product. Uh, the only way to get it to market was to do it myself. And okay, so to be in a business in the tech industry, you need to have some tech skills. That goes without saying. I had that. I was fortunate. I had a good technical acumen. I didn't have any business sense, but I figured, okay, Kevin, I need to have business skill and technical skill. Which is harder to learn? Technical. Okay, I got the technical down. How hard can business be, Kevin? How hard could it be? I'll figure it out. Famous last words. Turns out it's way harder than the tech I had learned over the years. Anyway, So I won't even call them skills. The attributes I brought to the table when I started my business was ego, naivety, arrogance, ignorance, and probably above all, a very poor assessment of risk. And then throw some passion in there. That's good. So I had all these things: ego, arrogance, naivety, very poor assessment of risk, arrogance, all that. And thank God I had that, Kevin. Those would not normally be traits you would brag about. But in that moment, when I started from nothing, when I bootstrapped the company from, you know, couch change and credit cards, I needed ego. I needed to be ignorant of the fact that statistically 80% of all startup businesses fail. That's just a fact. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So I thank God for those negative traits, because without those, I would never have started the business, ever. I was so stupid, Kevin. Maybe ignorant's a better word, but I'll say stupid. I was so stupid. We were technically insolvent. We owed more money than money that was coming in, but I didn't even realize it. I was like Weekend at Bernie's. I was like the dead guy that people just drug around to parties. You know, like I'm still here. The company was dead, but I just kept showing up to work every day. I kept bringing in more cash. We had created a Ponzi scheme where we were both the victim and the perpetrator. We were Ponziing ourselves, just trying to bring in enough cash to survive another day. So what I learned is that the skills that are required to start a company, say to get it from A to B, are vastly different than the skills that are required to get the company from B to C. To me, it's like shifting a manual transmission car. So you start out in first. First gear is highly leveraged. Your transmission, your engine spins at a high RPM, but you're only going 20 miles an hour. First gear is useful to get you started. You can't take the car far or fast in first gear. If you just bought a brand new 5-speed manual transmission Toyota and you never shifted it into second, it wouldn't last 100 miles. You'd burn up the engine, you'd burn up the clutch, you'd burn up the transmission, something would fail. So it's important that we are able to shift into the appropriate gear for the speed of the motor vehicle, or in this case, for the scale of the business, growth of the business. And that's where most entrepreneurs fail. 80% of all business startups fail, not because business is inherently risky. It's because the owners of the business, the founder of the business, the entrepreneur behind the business fails to shift into the appropriate gear, or fails to embrace and learn or acquire the appropriate skill set. So what gets you from A to B, if left unchanged, kills you from B to C. Now, some entrepreneurs have the equivalent of 3 years in their skill set. So they can start a company from A, bring it to B, bring it to C, and then at some point, as successful as it seemed to be, as you know, the trajectory was looking good, they hit a plateau, and that plateau is based on their own skill set. They've run out of tricks. Their toolbox is empty. The magic wand no longer works. So in my case, I needed to do two things. I needed to acquire new skills, which I did, but then I needed to hire new skills, which I did. So between me learning a few things and me hiring great people who were, you know, more adept at running a business at a higher scale, I was able to eventually learn how to grow the business and properly scale it and ensure that the business has all the skill sets, either through me or through my team, that were required at that stage of the business. But as the business grows, the rules all change. So the fundamentals don't change, but lots of things change. And if you don't evolutionize yourself, if you don't adapt, if you don't grow, if you don't scale yourself, your business will not scale. That's my takeaway on that.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
go ahead.
that was the scale part. You also asked me a second question. You rolled them into one.
Yeah, about the difference between scaling and growing a
Right,
business. Yeah.
right. So in the early days of the business, I was just concentrated on growth. First of all, I didn't even know the difference between growth and scale. I thought they were synonymous with each other. I thought it was the same word. And when we were having all these problems, I remember thinking and saying many, many times, we're having problems at this level of business. We just need to grow. If we had more business, those problems would go away. And that's not what happened. It's just the opposite. When we grew 50%, our problems grew 200%. It was crazy and consistent, predictable. So I did not understand the difference between growth and scale. And unplanned, unmanaged, unmitigated growth is a luxury almost no small business can afford. There are businesses, Kevin, documented cases of businesses that went bankrupt while being profitable. They had profit on their balance sheets. Why did they go out of business? Because they ran out of cash. They grew too fast. They grew beyond the ability to invest into that growth. So, people think companies go out of business because they're not profitable, which is true, but they also go out of business because they are profitable and they ran out of cash, usually due to growth. So let's assume that I wanted to grow my business 20%. We have a factory, so we're building equipment. So if I want to have 20% more revenue in 2027 versus 2026, I'm going to have to start building a bigger factory. I'm going to need more equipment. I'm going to need more employees. I'm going to need more inventory. I'm going to need more storage shelves. I might need a second forklift. I'm going to need more service people to handle the service of those extra 20% of machines that we're selling. I might need more accounting staff. Maybe I need a greater sales force to get to that 20% increase. The point is, I might have to invest 200% more money to get that 20%. When I was a kid, my mom would get me clothes that were 2 sizes too big. That way I can wear them for a year and a half or 2 years. I would just grow into them, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you want to scale a business, you have to invest in the future. It's an ROI situation. You don't just spend 20% more to get 20% more. You have to spend 200% more to get 20% more. And now that you've invested all that extra money in infrastructure and talent and all those things to get your extra 20%, that might take you to 60%. But it's not linear. So I kept trying to grow and I kept using up all of our money trying to grow. And that's when I went back to the just make great decisions mantra. Instead of coming up with some stupid growth number that was taken out of a rabbit hat, frankly, like, oh, 20% sounds good. It'll make the banks happy. We don't have growth numbers. We don't have, let me rephrase that. We don't have growth goals every year. I mean, we do have a goal of not to go out of business and to remain profitable, obviously, but we don't put a number on it because for two reasons. One, just because we put a number on it, how's that just going to magically happen? We make great decisions and that drives whatever growth those great decisions can drive. And if we want to grow more, we just make better decisions. We don't have a predetermined number. And the other problem with a predetermined number, say I told the whole company, we want to grow 20% this year. And let's assume we accomplish that. What if we had the capacity to grow 50%? But because I set the goal at 20, we kind of manifest that result.
Mm-hmm.
So we got 20. We could be cutting ourselves short. So instead of all that hocus pocus stuff, we just work on, as simple as this sounds, as corny as this might sound, just make great decisions, people. And the right growth for the stage of your business will appear. And it'll be growth you can handle because you're just making great decisions. And part of those great decisions might be to say no to a customer, to fire a customer, to get rid of a product line that's not great, doesn't make you a lot of money, and that takes up time and capacity to build something that could be much more profitable. Don't be afraid to say no. No is the most profitable word in business. I think it is probably more than yes. So anyway, long answer to your short question.
Well, I know what, as a journalist, the more information I can get, the happier I am, my friend. So no worries there. But I want to end, Mike, on a positive note because last year, our friends over at the Miami Herald said that 79% of prospective American entrepreneurs believe that it's the current environment allows entrepreneurs to start a business. They say it's a good time to start a business, my friend, despite persistent factors like uncertainty, inflation, and rising interest rates, my friend. So I'm curious to ask you whether you think now is a good a time to start a business in America. What do you think of those findings? And my friend, my final part of that question is about your own personal and professional legacy and how you want that to be defined. So you can take that question in any direction you wish, my friend.
In terms of, is this a good time to own a business? Yeah. But when I started in 92, it was a good time to run a business, to own a business. I think, I don't know if this is a better time or a worse time. I think uh, let me give you a different answer. I think the United States and Canada are the perfect places to start a business. So my family all came from Europe, my mother and father, my father from Poland, my mother from Scotland, from the UK. And there are certainly plenty of entrepreneurs in Europe, but the taxes are are just mercilessly high. The government regulation is out of control. The hiring and firing rules in countries, European countries largely, are it makes you never want to hire somebody. It's really difficult. The government puts in a lot of obstacles, over regulation. The United States and Canada are very similar in that we are an entrepreneur's heaven. Yes, there are regulations. Yes, there are taxes. Yes, there are laws about hiring and all that, but nowhere near as oppressive as most other countries. So I think in North America, um, this is the ideal place, and it's a little bit Wild West. Uh, Anyone with the right skill set or the willingness to learn or acquire the right skill set with a decent idea has a much better chance at succeeding in business than anywhere else in the world. And I mean that literally. So, yes, this is a great time to start a business. And yeah, interest rates are higher than they were, but they were higher than they are now when I started my business in 92. And, I got an SBA loan at some point, probably 93, 94. I bought a building and did SBA loan. Um, but I think now's a great time to start a business, not exclusively now, but more importantly, if you're in North America, you've got a lot of the work taken care of for you. You don't have all this. There'll be certain silly things you got to comply with, but nowhere near what the rest of the world has to. So that's one question answered. The other question, legacy. Um, I'm a big believer in that the business needs to exceed the sum of its parts, meaning there's got to be something more than selling cleaning machines in exchange for money. So I'm a huge believer that regardless of your business, whether you're sweeping chimneys, shoveling snow in the wintertime, building the latest biomedical device, whatever the case may be, making pizza, you need to have some larger than business goal. The business that could be philanthropic, that could be how you treat your team, that could be putting one of your employees' kids through college, that could be volunteering at the local YMCA or whatever the case may be. I do believe that the business needs to make a difference in the world, and I metaphorically refer to the business gods. I don't mean that spiritually, but metaphorically, those business gods, they're after me. And there were so many times when I deserved for the business gods just to put me out of business. I assume the only reason I survived in business back then was one of two reasons, one of three reasons. One of the reasons would be I made them laugh. Watch this guy. He's so stupid. He just keeps doing the same thing over and over again and failing. So I was good comedy for the business gods. The other reason is they took pity on me. Oh my God, we can't. Let's just give him another bone. Let's just give him a pass. And maybe the other reason is since day one, we've always expressed gratitude for being in business one more day by doing something outside of profit motivation, doing something for a nonprofit, volunteering, painting houses with our team, with organizations that do stuff like that, whatever the case may be. And maybe that's one reason the business god said, yeah, he sucks at business, but look at what they're doing for this community, right? So be bigger than your business. I think that I can't quantify it. It's not a scientific ROI, but there is an ROI to that. And helps you sleep at night. There's a lot of things in business that'll keep you up at night. That's one of the things that can help you sleep at night, just to make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, finally, tell me if people want to get connected with you, buddy, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, the easiest way, I have several websites, but the easiest one is just mikekonrad.com. So that's Konrad with a K. So mikekonrad.com, and the email would be mike@mikekonrad.com. That's the easiest way to find me. Or most people connect with me on LinkedIn. And you can just look up my name if you spell it right with a K. I'm all over LinkedIn. You'll just connect with me, become a connection, follow me, whatever the case may be. And that's one way to get a hold of me.
Well, fabulous, Mike. I can't thank you enough for your hospitality and answering my questions and engaging in conversation. I want to thank you for the nearly 3 decades of continuous improvement that you've brought to the field of electronic business innovation and everything in between, my friend. It was a real pleasure to engage in conversation with you this afternoon, and I want to thank you for being here, my friend. It's most appreciated.
Well, I'm honored to call you my friend as well. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Thanks for sharing Entrepreneur's Journey. Thanks for all the research you did. You asked excellent questions. I appreciate that. You put a lot of effort into this. It's very clear.